Good morning, everyone, or actually afternoon, I guess. My name is Doug Gore. As previously said, I'm a strategy lead here at the Ontario Trillium Foundation. The area of expertise is active people. So we've got some great panelists today that I'm really excited about. But just before we introduce the panelists, I want to give you a very quick overview of the foundation and our collective impact work. We're really going to blow through this fairly quickly and get to the good stuff, which is our fantastic panelists today. So the Trillium Foundation's investments are focused in 6 action areas, of which this is one: active people. The reality is this webinar, there's a lot of crossover with some of the other areas that we work in, green and certainly resilient youth. So I'm just really excited that we're able to kind of package these things together. And we're really happy to be partnering with Tamarack to provide a series of free webinars about our collective impact investment stream that focuses on those action areas. So thank you very much for joining us today. So our mission, very quickly, our mission is to build healthy and vibrant communities throughout Ontario. We do that by investing in hundreds, if not thousands, of initiatives every year. You can see on your screen some of the numbers. We do have a significant amount of resource to do that, and today we are going to be focusing on the collective impact part of what it is that we do, although it is not exclusive to those numbers. So that, in a nutshell, is our mission. The collective impact, I just want to touch on our collective impact stream for a second, which is one of 4 streams we have here. It's really designed to meet our desire to help solve complex social problems in Ontario over a long term. The things that we're interested in doing in the collective impact stream along with you are helping to co-design initiatives. It's really the only stream that we have where we are actively at the table with you as you work through your process. We are there to support you in a number of ways throughout that journey. One of those really critical ones, is evidenced by something like today, is capacity building services in partnership with our partner, who's Tamarack, who's just been a fabulous partner throughout this and brings an incredible amount of expertise to the collective impact work. Some of the other things that we do, we develop and host communities of practice around specific issues. I'll touch on some of those in a minute. We promote learning between different collective impact initiatives, because we find the best learning mechanism is to talk to somebody else that's doing it. Of course, we provide funding and technical assistance for monitoring and evaluation as you go through your journey. Our CI model, as you can see on the screen, has 3 phases. They are defined the impact, organize for impact, and deliver the impact. The reality is those are really a developmental phase, a planning phase, and an execution phase. And each one of those phases has a different amount of funding and length of time associated with it. All of those details can be found on our website. I don't want to bore you and look at that right now. So definitely go to our website if you want more information on our collective impact granting. On your screen now, you see our 6 action areas. Again, these represent our vision for building healthy and vibrant communities and what we aspire to achieve for our investments. Some of the issues that we've invested in through our collective impact granting are related to a whole bunch of action areas, including Indigenous language and culture, youth suicide, urban flooding, graduation rates, social integration, waste management, homelessness, physical activity. So as you can see, there is a whole breadth of issues that we've invested in that align well with our action areas. Within the active people area, the area that I work exclusively on, but touches with my colleagues, it's a very simple goal that we have here, which is really increasing physical activity for all of those reasons that we know are valid. As you see on your screen here, the way we've aligned our work with the Canadian Index of Wellbeing in order to measure whether we're having an impact or not is frequency of participation in physical activity and self-reported diabetes, because again, we know that is a proxy for other chronic disease that can be addressed largely through physical activity. So with our physical activity work, it's very simple. We do it through two mechanisms. That's improving the quality of programs, services, spaces, and encouraging people to become more active than they already are. Very simple, quality and quantity. So again, if you wanna learn more on that, feel free to go to our website, and there's a ton more there. And before we, just the last thing before we get to our fantastic panelists, is if you want to know more, here's how you do it. If you're interested in the collective impact stream, the first thing you want to do is reach out to us, and there's a whole bunch of ways that you can do that. You can come to our website. There's all kinds of information there. Call our support center. We've got an email address there that you can contact us. And on your screen, you see our program support person, Chelsea Cars, would be happy to answer any of your questions. So I would just say, if you're interested in collective impact, questions, musing about it, get a hold of us. And we're going to move on now to our panelists. That's Trillium's approach right now, far more there, but we're super excited to have these people that have taken out of their valuable time to talk to us today. So I'm going to introduce them and then turn it over to them to go. First, on your left there, you see Shirley Boxham. Shirley is the current lead project consultant with Headwaters Communities in Action, overseeing all of their projects. She has been a Mulmur resident for over 10 years and now lives there full time. Shirley, I'm hoping that you tell us where that is, because I, for one, don't know where it is. After over 20 years in adult learning, performance consulting, business analysis, and project management in the IT and financial sectors, she brings a variety and wealth of skills to this work. She's a passionate advocate of farmland and source water protection by way of the North Dufferin Agriculture Community Task Force, of which she is now chair, and manages activities of the Food and Water First campaign. Shirley, thanks very much for joining us today. The next person I'd like to, oh, well, thank you. And can you just tell me, for my own edification, Shirley, where is Mulmur?
Well, it's actually one of my slides, Doug, and
people
say Headwaters Communities in Action. Where's that? So I'll get into that in the early part.
Fantastic. Thanks for being with us, Shirley. Kathy Dueck. Kathy has worked in the field of environmental education for more than 25 years. As a founder of a community-based environmental organization and a Center for Sustainable Landscape Education, she's worked in the nonprofit sector as a program designer, manager, board member, and public educator working with children and adults of all ages. Kathy currently coordinates the Pathways to Stewardship and Kinship Collaborative and is a graduate student in Canadian and Indigenous Studies at Trent University. Kathy, thanks so much for being with us here today.
My pleasure.
And last but not least, we've got Jacob Rodenberg. Jacob is the executive director of Camp Kawartha, who oversees the Pathways project, an award-winning outdoor education center and summer camp. The camp operates as a residential outdoor center, a summer camp, and as an innovative environmental center. Jacob's passion is teaching children to love and protect their local environment. He holds a teaching certificate and a master's in education and has worked in the field of outdoor education and camping for 30 years. Jacob received the Ontario Society of Environmental Educators Leadership in Environmental Education Award. In 2007, Jacob was awarded the Richards Education Award for Excellence in Natural History Education for Ontario Nature. He co-teaches part-time at Trent University a course in environmental education. Jacob has developed, in partnership with Trent's Faculty of Education, an Eco Mentor certificate program for teacher candidates, and recently an Eco Mentor certificate program with Fleming College for early childhood educators. This approach to environmental education has been adopted by 4 other universities. Jacob, thanks again for taking so much time out of your day. We really appreciate it. For those of you on the line, I know this one is, like I said, it's by area is active people, but it's so implicitly tied in with other things that these folks are doing that we really wanted to focus on a breadth of work. So without further ado, I pass it over to Shirley.
Thank you very much, Doug. I'm going to flip right away to our second slide since there we go. Has everybody got the map, Headwaters boundary? So that explains what Headwaters is, or what the region is. It's Dufferin County and Caledon. That's actually a federal riding. Headwaters term comes from that geologically, this is the headwaters for 5 river systems. hence the name. So I am in Dufferin County, and I'm in that top right quadrant of Dufferin County. We used to have an address that said Mansfield, Ontario, and the Postal Service changed it to Mulmer. A little disappointing because Mulmer's kind of a funny name and nobody's ever heard of it. Mind you, they've never heard of Mansfield either, so we say Dufferin County a lot of the time. So that's where we are. Flipping to our next slide. So the beginnings of HCIA, I came along a few years after HCIA had already been up and running. And it really started from a series of conversations amongst some citizens talking about what's happening in our community, what isn't happening in our community, what are the priorities that people have, and what are the things that maybe aren't being addressed, so gaps that are in between some of the organizations and not-for-profits that are in our area. And so the conversations led to the definition of this mission statement that this organization needs to be a catalyst for positive community change by bringing together and engaging the citizens of Headwaters to work collaboratively towards this overarching issue of community well-being. And what does that mean? It means a number of things. We'll get to that in a second. So that required, of course, some surveys, more conversations, some structured data gathering, because these things, if you're going to coalesce projects, get funding, and move things forward, you really have to have some evidence-based proposals in hand. So citizen input and the 2011 report, HCIA came out with, and that's the picture on the left, the 2011 Community Wellbeing Report, and it was an industry leader at the time in bringing together, again, feedback from the community and looking at what is it that people think are important, what do they think needs to be worked on. And part of that effort was this recognition that we really have to work collaboratively. This can't be just one organization, because the issues that we're looking at are multi-sectoral, meaning, you know, it involves the municipality, it involves a health department, it involves citizen groups, and those groupings change depending on what you're looking at. And so we need to work collaboratively to create opportunities to address our most complex issues. We need to work together. Moving to the next slide. Okay, so the Wellbeing Initiative, again, from 2005 to 2011, and you can see that the identification of the need for some sort of data and then the actual output of the data was a bit of a long process, and that's because it hadn't been done before. There really wasn't a roadmap to follow. And so, you know, we need to know that we're asking the right questions if possible. We need to know that we're putting out something that's going to be of help to the community. And so what was developed was this Foundations of a Healthy Community, which we'll get to in a minute. And it was really this very first generation of defining what is well-being and what is that community well-being analysis. So it involved survey data, analyzing the data, of course, report generation, and that gave us the identification of priorities, which led to program development. And this initial report was foundational to those projects that really defined the beginnings of HCIA, which was food system, the trail system, and support of the not-for-profit sector in the Headwaters region. So this Foundations of a Healthy Community, and I excuse the fact that it's a little bit blurry. I've got an old version of this. But in all this feedback that is coming in, people are saying, you know, what's important to me, what's important to the community, what do I think we should focus on. We needed to define it and organize it in buckets. And so we've got these pillars or buckets. And this, again, is first iteration: the healthy people, engaged citizens, vibrant culture, sustainable environment, and dynamic economy are the main areas falling into this community well-being umbrella. So just to sort of capture that journey, community priorities and program development, again, conversations, very casual conversations on community needs, highlighted the need for data. We had a survey, data analysis, come out with a report, that first community well-being report. The priorities are identified. organized into foundations of a healthy community, more conversations, more meetings, and bringing out from the community leadership and champions and interested citizens. Great to identify things that need to be addressed. Who's going to do that? This is, again, all new territory. Organizing the people that came forward into areas of interest and working groups. The groups then, the Trails group, the food group, the NFP group, identified the priorities within those groups. They formed work plans, identified funding opportunities, and coalesced project initiatives to get those different groups up and running. The next slide, I've got community priorities in Headwaters 2016. So I'm just kind of highlighting this journey. We had this 2011 report, and then we had a 2016 report, because part of this whole collective impact process, in our experience, has been that it's iterative. We collected this data, we got the groups up and running, and then there's people coming and going, and then the priorities may change based on all kinds of impacts and things that are happening in society and in the environment around us. And so we went back out, collected the information again, using a lot of the same questions and indicators, came out with the second report, which is Community Priorities in Headwaters 2016, because we wanted to be sure, for all the things that are changing in the world, what's happening with our community priorities. And 2015, emerging priorities, it was 2015 was the data collection. The report was more 2016. So what did we find out? Strong agreement that those priorities identified in 2011 were still a focus for people and still important. So local food, trails, and the NFP sector was combined with rural transportation. That's a big thing out in our rural communities, is getting people from A to B. New priorities are community safety, and what that means is not so much safety in terms of its traditional description, but community safety. As we explored that, was really more around that people would step outside their door and feel safe and known in their community, that they could rely on their neighbors, that they felt connected to the people around them. So that became organized under community safety. Also, economic well-being and poverty reduction has been identified. Employment opportunities, housing, attracting and supporting local businesses, also part of community well-being. And engaging youth and seniors has been identified too. So those are sort of new and emerging priorities. So next slide, HCIA, a community hub. As HCIA as an organization has matured over the years, we have found ourselves more in the position of a community hub. So sort of a platform or a basis by which these different project areas can form, and they may form projects. They may go off on their own and become quite independent, as the Headwaters Food and Farming Alliance has become. We've had to actually identify a project group as being community well-being, because that needs to be circled around again and again. You've got to keep collecting that data. You've got to keep things fresh, and you've got to make sure that the report has meaning to the community. The chat group, which is actually our Trails group, Citizens of Headwaters Active Transportation Team, that's gone through some iterations. We'll get to that in a minute. And their not-for-profit sector hub, and DC Moves. DC Moves is a collaborative of Dufferin County agencies that have come together. We've partnered with Dufferin County on this one. It's Dufferin County's idea. We helped them to partner get it off the ground. And that's a hub of Dufferin County agencies coming together to share information, understand what everybody does, and again, look at issues that span across the different agencies, like poverty, like mental illness, and other things. And projects are starting to coalesce between agencies from that. And again, our Rural Transportation Working Group. On to the next slide. So our Trails project. Trails started out as, again, group of people concerned about health and well-being, about getting people active. We have this trail system in Headwaters. There's some here, there's some there, there's people using some, not using some, people know about them, they don't know about them. It's a big portfolio. What do we do with that? Well, some foundational projects were identified as needed to really get the attention of the community and get the group in a better position to understand where the priorities were. So an infographic was developed and printed, put on the site, and also shared with our tourism office. And that was, here are the trails that we know about in the area, and that thereby encouraging people to use them. A trails audit was completed and posted, also utilized by the tourism office. What was important about the trails audit was this. It was actually an identification of how many people were using what trails. And that was important because everybody thought the people were using the trail that was right beside the town that had the nice lake and the ducks and the, very nice scenery and boardwalks and stuff like that. Very popular trail. Everybody uses it, and everybody assumed that that's the only one that was being used. Well, guess what? We put trail counters out on the other ones, and we found out that almost as many people were using one of the other trails in the region, and the other ones as well. What's important about that is when you're asking for funding to complete a boardwalk, to do some trail maintenance, to have a trail event, the township needs to know that that's actually going to impact a certain number of its residents. And so that trail audit really came in handy. Another thing that the group did was identify that cycling needed to be highlighted and promoted throughout the region. And so they did a Can Bike project, which was inviting some super cycling enthusiasts in and getting them certified in Can Bike so that they in turn could pay it forward and provide their services at some cycling events to get people comfortable with bikes, to get people on the trails. That led to a Kids Safe Cycling Festival that we had in 2014, and we've done a couple of things since then too. That was just sort of the kickoff one. So from trails, what's happened with this trails group? The engagement of the group. So it started with a group of concerned citizens. We have invited in at different times the cycling club, the recreation department of Caledon, a running club, the Bruce Trail Conservancy, local conservation authorities, because there's several of them, Dufferin County Forest Management representative, Town of Orangeville, Public Health, Town of Mono. So you can see we've really got a collective going here, and depending on what projects you're starting to focus on, because trails is a big thing, and active transportation and healthy people, these are very broad things. And so pulling out of all of this enthusiasm a project to get off the ground means, who's at the table, where's the funding, and what's the priority. It's getting those things together. And so the activities and programs that we have done, again, trails audit, trail counters, cycling certification, and safe cycling workshops for, we've had 3 of them, I believe. And so Bike Friendly Communities Initiative has also started to get up and running, terms of reference for the group. So you need some structure in these groups because it starts wandering. And this is one of those messy parts of collective impact. You get people together, everybody's enthused. Sometimes it's a strong personality that says, let's go on cycling, or let's go on something else. And the group may start to wander. So you need that mission statement and the vision statement, and you need a terms of reference. Not to be onerous, but to provide some structure so as to be a guiding factor. And we came out with a new logo that better represented the group as well. And again, these things are iterative, the collection of information, the review of mission and vision, work plans, to see, where have we been, where do we need to go to. And so I'm on the last slide, I believe here, the lessons learned. And we've learned some of them the hard way. Strategic communications. You need to keep circling around with those past summit attendees. We've had these summits bringing all the different members of the community in. They need to have regular updates on where we are and opportunities to engage again. you need a brand and a logo that creates a community profile. This is absolutely essential because trails means different things to different people, and you may have pockets in the community that are undergoing their own trails initiative, which is great. This isn't a territorial thing. It's about engaging with people and working in partnership. The refresh activities are really important as well, that you need to have, again, circle around with those work plans, circle around with your communication strategy and making sure that you're engaging with the right people at the right time. The work plans, the Trails Summit is a great opportunity to get people together. And procurement of people that are sitting at the table. And funding scans, as always. I think everyone knows that one. Ensure the framework and processes are in place, such as long-term objectives and an annual review, again, to make sure that the group is following a plan. One of the things, as I said before, that we've discovered is very easy to wander based on who's sitting at the table and based on perhaps narrowing of funding opportunities. And so this is an iterative process. You need to circle around with some of the basics that got the group going in the first place. And I think I've probably gone over my time, so I better stop. Doug, are you there?
I am. Thanks so much, Shirley. And I think we're gonna move on to Pathways to Stewardship and Kathy and Jacob now. Thanks so very much.
Yeah. So I'll take the first slide. This is Jacob, and so we as a community were beginning to get worried about how much time kids were spending indoors. I think we looked at the latest statistics. Something like 7 hours and 50 minutes kids were spending in front of glowing screens, not outdoors, not active, not connected to the environment. And we began to wonder, well, how do we as a community foster stewardship? And what we mean by a steward is someone who cares for each other and cares for the environment. The other question we ask, well, who's responsible for that? And some people might say, well, it's the parents' responsibility. Others might say, no, it's the school's responsibility. Really, it belongs in education. We maintain it takes a whole community. And if that's the case, we started to think about, well, what does every child need from the time they're born to the time they graduate from high school? What kinds of experiences, knowledge do they need to become an engaged steward? So those are the kinds of questions that we began to ask. Then we realized there's a lot of cool things going on in the Peterborough area, which is where we're located. We've got lots of camps, we've got outdoor ed centers, we've got provincial parks, we've got municipal parks. But nobody's talking to each other and no one's coordinating their efforts. And while cool things might be going on, it's not strategic. So the idea behind the Pathway to Stewardship was to try to align all various groups together so that we could come up with a common plan. And when we're talking about groups, we're talking about things like public health, the school board, and Kathy will talk more about that later. But really it comes down to how collectively can we foster stewardship in children of all ages, and can we activate the community to make that happen? I'll pass it over to Kathy right now, who will.
Now, this is a piece. This is a piece of our overall plan, our theory of change, and I noticed great similarities between this diagram and the one that Shirley showed earlier. And we looked at what are our long-term goals. And initially, this started out as very much an environmental project, a green people oriented project. And the more that we talked about what we would need, the pieces that we'd need to put in place to achieve a healthy environment, the more we realized the incredible collective potential of including other sectors and working collaboratively together. So essentially our long-term goals are focused on healthy people, and we're focusing on children and youth basically in this project from birth to graduation from secondary school. We also recognize the importance of a healthy community, which brings in that community engagement piece where children are engaged in their world and feel supported. And to bring those together towards achieving a healthy environment, we do need to actively foster a culture of stewardship. Now, some of the sectors that have been involved in our initial consultations have been the environmental sector, the education sector, both the school boards as well as the people who teach teachers. So we've been working with Trent University School of Education as well as our local community colleges early childhood education program. Certainly the health sector is very involved. We're looking at increasing children's physical activity and engagement in the outdoors. And we also recognized early in the process the incredible wisdom that our First Nations have to share with us, since their culture really is based on connections to the land and raising children who have that sense of responsibility and connection with the natural world. And also, there's nothing like the arts community in helping to play a role in that mental health piece and making the community connections. So we went through a process, just to really briefly summarize. We went through an extensive community consultation process. In addition to our original steering committee, we collectively interviewed 80 community leaders to find out what experiences they recalled from their childhood or their days as a youth that were critically important to them in developing those very important connections with the natural and human community. We superimposed the results of those interviews on some literature-based research, and through that we started to develop some trends that became a part of our document and our work plan.
So here are some of the trends that emerged both from the interviews and the research. And it was really interesting to see that many of the themes were similar to what the people said in the interviews and what came out in our research. And it really was looking at Indigenous research, looking at outdoor education literature, looking at environmental education literature from all around the world. And here's just some themes for you to think about. One of them is the idea of respect for other living things, recognizing that we're immersed in a system of life and that in order to protect it, we have to recognize it as something that merits being treated gently, being treated respectfully. This is the First Nations teaching as well. The idea of a sense of place, that all of us maybe in our childhood can recall a special place we'd go to over and over again, and we would develop a fondness for that place, a sense of responsibility for that place. And, you know, humans have an innate desire to want to belong to each other, but we also need to be rooted to a place. So fostering that sense of place from early on is a really important thing. Positive interactions with animals. Over and over again, people in the interviews talk about the importance of having a pet, the importance of just going out and experiencing nature and seeing animals. The idea of creative expression, that we can acquire knowledge, yes, but somehow we have to be able to take that knowledge and express feelings. And so we give kids an opportunity to express themselves through the arts that will help to engender a sense of caring and love and respect. And the idea of the senses, if you think about it, you know, we talk about plugging in to technology, but we argue that we're endowed with remarkable sensory capabilities. We can see in 3 dimensions, we can hear in surround sound, we can touch, we can feel. By practicing sensory awareness to our local landscapes, we help children to feel a sense of connectedness to the land. A sense of play, so giving kids unstructured time just to be outside to play and engage with nature, because if they don't know what nature is, it'll become like a foreign landscape to them. They won't want to protect it when they're an adult. The idea of having a mentor, someone who takes them under their wing and has positive experiences in the outdoors, and many others too. I realize that we're running out of time, but we try to distill and take all of these themes and then put them into the framework, which we'll talk about in a moment. We did click. There it is.
So all of this information was distilled into a guidebook, essentially, where we focus on each 2-year age span of childhood from birth to age 17 or 18. And we identified 30 age-linked landmark experiences that we propose should be the right of every child to experience. And these landmarks are geared to their age and their various stages of development. So our contention is that, we as a society, we've made it a priority to make sure that every child has the opportunity to learn how to read. And we believe that it's equally important that every child has the opportunity to develop into someone who is connected to their world, who is inspired and energized by their world, and who feels a sense of responsibility collectively for well-being. Now, in the short time span that we have today, we won't be able to go into all of the landmark experiences, but many of them do involve physical activity in the outdoors, either alone, with a supportive mentor, with friends, exploring independent mobility, opportunities for creative expression using natural materials, opportunities to develop leadership skills in terms of learning about teamwork. So we are actually in the second phase now of Trillium's collective impact stream. We've put together a game plan, and we're just at the initial stages of preparing to launch some pilot outreach activities where we will work with schools, with families, with community groups towards that goal of giving these key landmark experiences to every single child in our community. And we'll wrap up our talk at that point.
And I'll just say one more thing. The whole idea of agency, that every kid, no matter what age and stage they're at, can do something positive for the environment, and making sure that whatever we inspire them with is age appropriate. And having said that, we'll wrap up.
Thanks very much, Shirley and Catherine and Jacob. I really like the way that the dots have been connected between physical activity, environmental stewardship, being outdoors, resiliency of youth, agency, as you just talked about, Jacob. That really is, as a funder, sometimes we get caught in the game of finding individual pieces. Really a holistic approach to bettering things is the way to go. So thanks so much for doing that. We are a little short on time, and I do want to make sure that anybody on the line has a chance to ask their questions. So quickly, I'm going to go to question number 1 and ask, I guess, Shirley, if you have specific insights that you could give us on some of the challenges that you faced in going down your collective impact journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of I saw a collective impact presentation probably a year ago by Sylvia Chu, who works with Tamarack, and presented that at one of our meetings, actually one of our community meetings. And one of the things that really jumped out at me was how bumpy and messy it can be, and we've certainly experienced that. So the challenges are, and I alluded to some of that in my presentation, that it's easy to wander. You really have to have a focus on, what's the issue or impact that you're trying to solve. Because when we look at healthy people and trails in particular, that's broad, and you can't do all of it. So you've got to narrow it down and be really clear on your goals. So I would say that would be it, that the challenge is maintaining a focus and a momentum on that focus.
Fantastic. Similar discussion that we've heard from some other people in some of these other webinars. Kathy, Jacob, do you want to have a crack at this?
Yeah, so one of the challenges we found was we proudly used the term stewardship, and then when we consulted with First Nations and Indigenous people, they said that word doesn't work for us because it presumes, dominance over the earth. It's not a reciprocal relationship. So we struggle with that because stewardship appears in the Ontario curriculum, and we wanted, of course, to use the language of curriculum to convince teachers that this is important education. So we came up with the idea of stewardship and kinship. And kinship is a word that resonates with First Nations because it presumes that, my family isn't just me and my community, but it is the living systems that support and nourish us all. That's part of our family too. And that's captured by the word kinship. Yeah, and the other thing we found, Kathy?
Well, you were talking, Shirley, about how messy collective impact can sometimes be. And when you're working with large bureaucracies, as the school board, one of the challenges that we have found repeatedly is that there seems to be quite a bit of reassigning portfolios to various people in the school boards, and spend a lot of time developing a really good relationship with a key school board contact, and then they get transferred into another portfolio. And so it's a matter of constantly regenerating, renewing positive relationships with representatives in some of the key stakeholder agencies. So it's a task that's never finished, that developing relationships.
That's great, thanks. I think that idea of it never being finished is kind of the nature of collective impact. So now that we've looked at some of the challenges, what about some of the benefits? What have you seen happen through this process for you that help you address the issues that you're trying to tackle? Shirley, do you want to have a crack at that?
I think some of probably the key benefit to the collective impact approach has been the dissemination or the sharing of the understanding that collective impact is the way to go. We were really the first organization in Headwaters that formally came out with, this is how we approach issues. And so putting together those initial partnerships, citizen groups and public health, the municipalities, Board of Trade, and so on, has really helped increase the profile of the approach and the issues. And that's the only way to address the issues that we've been looking at, because we are looking at gaps in the community. And these are gaps, again, poverty, looking at poverty reduction, looking at mental illness, looking at the trails system. They impact so many people and so many groups. They can only be addressed in a collective impact way, and that gets people's attention, makes people understand how multi-sectoral the issues are, and also helps people understand that these are community issues, not your issue or the municipality's issue. It's our issue. And that's been a really key benefit from our perspective.
Oh, that's great. Jacob, Kathy?
It's Kathy here. We've certainly found that working in partnership with non-traditional sectors, such as grouping together with health and the arts, does involve taking more time to develop plans of action, but there's a real benefit in learning to understand a variety of perspectives, and in helping us to reach those that may not already be on board. So while the process is time-consuming, I think the results are definitely worth it. And some of the guidelines that we've received through Trillium that are part of the collective impact process, such as preparing a theory of change, is something that we probably would not have done otherwise. And at the time, it was really difficult for us to go through that process of creating in diagram format a summary of what we were trying to do and how we were going to do it. In retrospect, that was a really useful process for us to go through, and we refer to that all the time now. So having had people go before us to help develop some of these steps is very, very useful.
And the other gratifying thing about the whole collective impact undertaking was just how many people responded to this issue that we brought up. And we did a community forum. We had immediately between 30 and 40 organizations offering to help. So obviously we're touching on a nerve, and I think we're coming up with an idea that has some traction.
That's fantastic. But breaking down the silos, I think people quite often want to be involved. They just don't. They're waiting for somebody to kind of catalyze it. So, and I guess, sorry, I guess finally, Shirley, you did a great job of sharing your learnings with us. So maybe we'll go straight to Kathy and Jacob on what can you learn, or what advice do you have for others who are considering a collective impact approach?
Well, a number of things. One is that if you are consulting with in non-traditional partnerships, you have to be prepared to go beyond paying lip service to other people's perspectives, and you may need to actually, rework your foundation. And for example, once again, that issue of collaborating with regional First Nations really was the incentive. Like we produced a draft document, and through extending the collaboration, we rewrote big chunks of the document, and we changed the name of the document. So you do need to go beyond paying lip service to everyone's perspectives and make sure that they all feel included and that is reflected in your and moving forward.
Yeah, and recognizing that different stakeholders have different conceptions and different language to address the same issue, and you have to listen openly to try to understand their paradigm, their perspective, which might not be the same as yours, but similar. So eventually finding a common language that you can all agree to is important. And recognizing that long-term change is complex, it's messy, and it takes patience and perseverance, but in the end, it's eminently worth it, and good things will come.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for taking the time today. I'm going to pass it over to Heather to see if there's any questions on the line.
Yes, we have one question, but I always do this on these webinars, is put my 2 cents worth in, and it's funny because this really resonated with me. My boys had a PD day yesterday, and I said, okay guys, go outside and play. And they said, but there's nothing out there to play. And I thought, we live on a farm. There's trees, there's barns, there's animals, there's an oasis out there. And when you said, Jacob, when you said about being worried about how much kids are indoors, that just, it hit me like a wall just now, that, you know what, I'm going to have to teach them how to play outside. Yeah. And, I'm actually going to start following you now, because I really want to see how this works and how we can bring it to our community, and bring maybe Scouting and Optimus and our Trails group together, that maybe we can create something to teach our kids, unfortunately, how to play outside.
A lot of parents they suggest that the outdoors is dangerous. Their kid is safer in the basement in front of their computer, when in fact statistics show that being outdoors and playing is the healthiest thing you can do, and stranger abduction is next to nil, and there's so many benefits. But yes, kids need to be trained in how to play outdoors. Sad but true.
It is, and even Shirley, with the trails, there's some organizations that have put games out on the trails, like Spot Hartley the Health Hawk, and they hide them around, and so making it just more fun and interactive, I think this is great. And the reason why I'm saying this is leading into our question from Mary Jo, is that is your collective impact project creating change? Is it resolving the problems that you're trying to address? Are kids moving away from the laptops? And how do you, or how are you going to know this?
Yes, and that is a significant challenge for us. We're developing a pilot study, and from the pilot study we hope to get some good metrics that show what our approach is working, but we're at an early stage just yet. So we say we remain hopeful, but we have no way to prove that. We're working on it.
Mm-hmm. And Shirley?
There's been a couple of projects that our organization has supported in recent years. And one was interesting. It's the same type of thing, not so much on the activity, but on the food. And that is, we're out in farm country, and the kids going to schools in town being Orangeville, and it is a town, it's not a city. Those kids had no idea where their food was coming from, which was a shock to farmers living not that far away. So one of our we have a farm to school program is one of the programs that we've supported, and with the Trillium Grow grant actually, and that bringing farmers into the schools, telling kids about where the food comes from, how it's important, and local, fresher, better, and all of that. But the next generation of that is going to be getting kids out to the farms, and it's somewhat connecting them to the, I know it's a farming environment and not the natural environment, but there is a connect out there. Those two are connected to a large degree, and yeah, it's amazing how the kids have been isolated from their food system and from their natural system. And so the Farm to School program has helped get kids connected with their environment through the food system, which has been really important. And the other one has probably been the cycling workshops that kids were afraid to go out, not being that acquainted with cycling and not being that acquainted with trails. And there has been a measurable increase in kids getting out on the trails. So there has been some measurable benefit that we're really happy about.
Great. So another question is around continuous communication. So when you have your networks, if you could just, very briefly, how do you communicate to your network about the work you're doing, keeping them, because you got to keep them informed in what they're doing. So just very briefly, is it just website?
Sorry, is that one for me?
For both.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. I was told a while ago by the person that mines our website, you have to do the hard work of building a distribution list, or a mailing list, and a network. And it is hard work. It is if it's something. There are those things that take off on social media all by themselves. Your project may not be one of them, unfortunately. And so you do have to do that hard work of building distribution lists, communication pathways, and keep building and building and building. And it's something you have to dedicate time to, and keep everybody in the organization's attention on it, and have a communication strategy in place so that you're utilizing those networks on a regular basis.
Right.
I would agree. We have quite an extensive contact list that we try to keep up to date, and we do send frequent updates to everyone. And in addition, we have a number of people working on various working groups that are working on specific aspects of the project, and they're in regular communication with each other. But being once again in the early stages of this whole collective impact process, we haven't yet developed communications guidelines. We haven't yet developed a website or a logo, but that's all coming in the near future. But keeping in close contact with people, both speaking with them personally and through email contact. Really important for us.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we give people the information they need, but not overwhelm them.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So I'm just recognizing time here. We're going to just wrap up. Thank you very much, Shirley and Kathy and Jacob, for sharing your insights and perspectives with us today on the call. And many thanks to all of you for joining us. Your comments and questions have helped make this a dynamic and thought-provoking conversation. There are still many opportunities to learn. We have a community engagement workshop coming up in Kitchener-Waterloo, and also you all, if you go to the Ontario Trillium Foundation's website, they have some free Collective Impact 101 workshops that are coming up in the next month or so. And as promised, in a few days, we will email you the links to the audio and other materials related to today's call. We welcome your feedback on these calls, so please do email myself and let us know how we're doing. And thank you, everyone, and have a great day.